and part rational. That her fear is that my daughter's going to be behind. Did you know that once again, that drives us? And she mentioned specifically grade level expectations. So did you know that grade level expectations are different everywhere? You know, for example, if you look at a 5th grade curriculum, did you know that Montessori 5th grade has different grade level expectations than a Waldorf, than a Catholic school, than a public school, than a charter school? So you don't want to live your life around grade level expectations. The only time they really matter for you is if you think that your student is going to be going into a school. So if you think they're going to be starting in school the next semester, my goodness, set them up for success. Find out what that school's grade level expectations are and then prep for that. What books do they expect that your student should have read? What math level do they expect? What science? What history? And so prep for that so that your child has an easy transition into that school. Other than that, grade level expectations are random. In California, for example, we teach about the California missions in 4th grade, and we teach about Mother's Day in 9th grade. So that is just, grade level expectations are just a way that we're trying to calm the chaos, to organize a vast body of knowledge in a way that kind of gives us some flow through the grades. But if you're planning on homeschooling all the way through, it would be wiser to homeschool according to their interests, not according to a random grade level expectation. And you know that when they get into college, what are they looking for? 4 years of math, 4 years of history, 4 years of science. So that is very clear. Those are the grade level expectations. And they're looking at what those SAT and ACT scores are. And of course, did you know that a lot of the college students, everyone going in now, is weak in writing? Yeah, so the colleges, they know that. No matter what the majors are, my daughter went to LMU down here. 2 of my daughters graduated from Loyola Marymount. Well, they give free writing tutoring and writing clinics for every major. They don't care if you're biology or if you're writing. Everyone's coming in weak in writing, so we're going to get everybody up to speed, and it's free of charge. Because they can't do their job, they feel, until they get those universal writing scores up. So in general, homeschoolers are well prepared. Yeah, but you know what's happening nowadays is because homeschooling has such a good reputation for academics, people think that they can do nothing and that their child will be a genius, will be top of the mark, that they don't, just the fact that they are homeschooling, they don't actually have to do something. That's what's kind of happening now in trend, and I think it's funny. But you know, your child actually is going to have to do something. They actually are going to have to study, but they have a world of opportunity as to how they study. So for example, they have math requirements, but it doesn't tell you, it doesn't demand which math curriculum you have to use. It doesn't tell you which science curriculum, which history curriculum. They don't care what you study for history. Now in the summer grades, they want you to have US history if you're an American student, and I assume that you are, or civics. But in general, they can study about wars. They can study about Elizabethan England. It doesn't really matter. They just want you to study history. So you have a lot of flexibility within those subject areas. So why not help your child figure out what they're interested in? You know, what they're strong in, because that really is what's going to go with them into life. So one of the things that I ask my children all the time is, what is your #1 goal? So when we talk about that in the myths and reality, I want to explore that with you all the time. Keep asking them, what are your goals? What are your dreams? And what are you strong in? Let's really build up those strengths and then use those strengths to help any weaknesses that might be there. But if you focus all of your effort on weakness, you just end up with mediocrity and not a lot of joy. It's not a recipe for a successful education or a very fun life experience. Okay, what other fears? Thank you, that was really good. What other fears? Yes, please.
Stepping up for dual enrollment, enjoyable, but graduating with associates by the time you're done with high school.
Oh yeah, that's a great experience. He asked about dual enrollment. I think dual enrollment is one of the best kept secrets in education. So dual enrollment means that your high school homeschooler can get, like usually it's the junior year or senior year, they can take their classes at a junior college and get both high school and college credit for the same class. And these junior colleges, they have great language classes, they have great science labs that you may not have. So the way that you do for that is that you kind of plan ahead. My children did not want to do dual enrollment. I really tried to encourage them, but they didn't feel comfortable. They were 16, 17. They didn't, at that time, there were no online classes. They would have had to go to the junior college campus, and they didn't want to hang out with 19 and 20-year-olds. They didn't feel comfortable with it or safe with it, so they were not able to take advantage of it. But nowadays, you can do that dual enrollment online. And that's pretty cool. Wouldn't it be great if by the time they graduate from high school, they also already have their AA? And did you know that it's so much easier to get into college if you already have an AA? You've already proven that you can do well in college. Which is why when people go to junior colleges, they have an easier time transferring to four-year universities. Because if they have a good GPA, they don't have to take the SAT and ACT anymore. They have grades, they have proven that they have done well in college. So it's a really good one. Just be aware that your child may not want to do it. You know, what do you do? But I love the relationship that we build with our teen because I feel like it's safer. I feel like it's more beautiful. I feel like it helps us have a wonderful relationship with them throughout life. So if we come to them and we say, hey, did you know that there's this thing called dual enrollment? It might really be something that you would enjoy. It looks like it's a wonderful benefit of homeschooling. But if you talk about it back and forth and then they don't want to do it, you know, isn't it be great if you say, okay, I understand. I'm so glad we could talk about this. Thank you for telling me your feelings about this. And then you've listened to them and they know that you can be trusted and hopefully they will come to you with other problems and situations because then you're a safe person to talk with. Because one of the things I think that we want most with our children is we never want to be a dream killer. We want them to come to us with all of their crazy ideas. And our response is always, you can do that, honey. That sounds like a great idea. If you think you might want to be a doctor, then you might want to take some science classes and some math classes. Let's find some now. Oh, you think you might want to be a chef? That sounds like a great idea. And they may change their minds. They're probably going to, because we change our minds all the time. We're not necessarily doing the same thing that we did when we were 15. But you've become that safe person. You're the dream supporter. So when they're in their 20s and their 30s, hopefully they're going to be coming to you. That's their habit. You know, I've met this boy. I've met this girl. What do you think? I'm thinking about taking a job here. What do you think? And wouldn't that be great? Because then we have a good relationship. And maybe they'll even have wisdom for us too, that we can go to them. You know, I'm thinking about changing jobs. I'm thinking about learning the violin. I'm thinking I want to get fit. What do you think? Do you have some good ideas? Because as they get older, it does become more of a friendship. Because now all three of mine are in their 20s and we have such a good relationship, and that's a treasure. You know, that's what I wanted more than anything. Did we have some holes in their education? Of course, because it's not possible. But we didn't focus on the holes. We focused on growth. We focused on joy. We focused on strengths. And it made all the difference in the world. Any other fears? Yes, please.
The harder math, the science labs,
Yes.
those kinds of things that I remember.
Yeah.
And how to make that happen for.
So she's wondering about the harder subjects like math and science. And first of all, I want to catch you on your wording. Did you see how we accidentally say the harder subjects? That would be self-fulfilling prophecy, right? What's your experience going to be with math and science? Ooh, it's hard. Because you've already told your subconscious math and science are hard. So maybe if we used a word challenging, you know, or something like that, watch your wording on that because our kids are listening to us. And if we say, you know, girls are bad, it's okay, girls are bad at science. Oh, math is hard for everyone, honey. Oh, I hated math growing up. Boy, we have set some self-fulfilling prophecies into a beginning that we may not really want, right? And we just don't do it automatically, probably because we've heard other people saying that all the time. Or the world is hard now, you know, jobs are really hard now. And so what are you creating? You're creating hard. So what about, okay, let's talk about math and science. Now, those subjects are easier if you're solid in the prerequisites. So let's set you up for success for that. And I don't quite remember those subjects, or I didn't study them, but let's find somebody that can help. So for example, I love math, but I had a neighbor whose son was struggling with algebra. So she and I traded. She did cooking for me and I tutored algebra. So it doesn't even have to cost money, but you can find tutors, you can find online classes, you can find telephone tutors, you can do trades with people, you can find different kind of classes. Isn't that a great discussion to have with your child with that positive languaging? So hey, what do we think? Let's start thinking now. What are we going to do with those really interesting high-level classes? You know, those real smart classes. Look how you've just made those subjects very sexy. You know, very appealing. Instead of being something to be afraid of, you've made them like, wow, you know, those are really smart things. You know, everybody uses tutors. You know, how can we get a tutor? How can we afford a tutor? How can we do a trade for a tutor? Who can help us with that? Oh my gosh, Uncle John, he's really good at math. Maybe he can help you with that. Or we have Aunt Susie, you know, she works in a, biotech lab. If you just start asking the powerful questions, how can I, how can we, now you're identifying open doors. But as soon as you say something negative like, we can't, I can't, it's hard, you've closed the doors and locked them. You won't be able to see those openings. When my son came to me and said, I want to learn how to drive every kind of boat, if I just said, oh honey, that's not possible, we live in Sacramento, but instead you ask that powerful question, okay, how can he learn how to drive every kind of boat? And it turns out that Sac State has a boating clinic every summer for kids. Right, who knew? And that was even before the internet. So it's a lot harder. I had to really sleuth that out to find it, but it's there. Those opportunities are there. We just have to ask the how can I, how can we questions. And now suddenly you notice those emails that have been coming in. You think about that person. You say, I saw a vendor that did that. Now your eyes are open. Very powerful. Yes, please.
If you don't go the associate's route, and as homeschoolers, we can give them 4.0s, #1 in the class.
Yeah.
College, when they see that, I mean, they're going to just kind of joke that off. Is the only way to really prove your student to them is through the SAT, ACT?
Yeah, and not all kids are good test takers. So I had a daughter who ended up with a legitimate 4.2 GPA, lousy test taker. You know, what are you going to do? That's the game that we play to get in there. But it still doesn't really matter. There are ways around that too. So you may have kids that are not good at test taking. So they have some great programs out there right next to the Homeschool.com booth. Jean is an expert on test prep and on high school. So our booth is 701, so maybe she's 702. But come and talk with her because there are things that you can do about that. But the truth of it is too, is that they're not going to know how they're going to do in college until they get into college. My daughter wanted to be a doctor so bad, and she worked so hard her freshman year, but she got C's in her 2 science classes. And her counselor said, you're not going to make it. You know, I know that you're working really hard. You're not even sloughing off. You're not going to make it to medical school. They don't accept the C's. And so she said, okay, I want to have a real life. So she switched over to psychology and pre-law, and she was able to get A's there. I don't know what it is. Why is it that some subjects are easier for us and other things are harder? But she didn't feel bad about it. But you're not going to know how your children, they're not going to know how they do until they get in it. You just jump in. You jump in and you modify, you change as you go. And that's the thing about high school too. You're going to kind of set the course, but you're going to modify it. You know that whole rule about, please come on in, 747s, they set the destination, but they get off course all the time. They're constantly course correcting, and so will you. And so will they when they get into college. They may think that they want to be an engineering major, and then they find out, oh my gosh, I hate that. So then they'll change to another major. They're going to find their way. And we're going to give them skills now at this fundamental time on how to find their way. One of the advantages homeschoolers have is that they have more white space in their life. They're not as busy every second of the day. So they're able to think about who they are, what they care about, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. That's a huge advantage for homeschooling. They're not just kind of racing through, seeing them through themselves through the eyes of their peers. They tend to have really good relationships with adults, so they tend to have a very strong sense of self. When my son went and did college interviews, he was so comfortable with it because he'd worked with adults as equals his whole teen years. So having a college interview was a piece of cake. But the school kids coming in, sometimes they'd had experiences where the teacher was the enemy, or they had to make the teacher happy because the teacher had all the cards. But when a homeschooler goes in, they're used to thinking of that adult as a helper for them, as a co-conspirator in their education. And that's pretty nice. Any other fears? Yes, please.
Selecting curriculum that meets the AG requirements in California for California state schools.
Okay. And you're talking about for high school. And you're talking about getting into like a CSUS or a state college?
Right.
Okay, they'll tell you. So if you think that that is your path, and it is kind of for most people, then when you look at the curriculum, that's the question you ask. How am I going to do on the transcripts? You would normally you just identify those classes as counting as that. So even though my son, we used a charter school, on his transcript they identified this class counts, this one doesn't, and it wasn't a big deal. So that curriculum that you're talking with, they will probably identify their courses, which ones count and which doesn't. But it was very easy. Yeah. And they give you lots of choices. There wasn't usually just one course. There were lots of ways of fulfilling that requirement. And let's talk about, for a minute, let's switch it. I'm so glad we talked about fears because sometimes that's the elephant in the room. But now let's talk about hopes. Share with us, please. Share with me, what are some of your hopes? In fact, if you want, let me ask you, what is your number one goal for your high school experience? What is your hope? What is your number one goal? Yes, please.
They will continue loving to learn.
Yes. His number one goal is that they continue to love a love of learning, that they continue to love to learn. Okay, then remember that. Write that down somewhere, get some kind of a symbol, because when you're in the thick of it and you're having a fight and the subject isn't going well, you're going to forget it. So put that up somewhere, get a poster, put it up on your fridge, talk with your kids about that, let that be your guiding light. Because when you're in the well, when you're in the weeds, it's hard to see the sun. And really, this is going to be so great too. That's how you're going to evaluate your progress. That's how you're going to evaluate, thank you for coming, how you're going to be able to evaluate learning supplies. Is this going to enhance a love of learning for my child? And if they're crying over it, if they're hating it, if it's not working, stop it, find something else. Homeschooling is big business now. In the old days, you had one curriculum. Now look at this vending hall, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. When you come to homeschool.com, we have a resource guide, thousands of companies. Any educational product that is produced for the school market is also produced for homeschoolers. So if you have a curriculum or a product or something that is not working for your child, switch it out. Find something else that's going to work better. Yes, please.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
How do we know if our children don't like it and they don't want to do it?
Yeah.
Or truly, that's not for them.
Or if it's a bad day. I know, isn't it hard to tell?
I
And
don't want to be manipulated by
I know, and they're so good at that, aren't they? Her question is, how do I know if it really is the curriculum that's not working, or if the child's just having a bad day, or if they're manipulating me? Well, I think trust you, trust them. Pay attention. You can kind of tell, especially if you ask those questions, like maybe you see something going on, and that's what you ask yourself, is this legit? Am I being manipulated, or is it just a bad day? So if it's a bad day, you step back, you go find your smile. You take a break, you say, hey, we're all just having a hard time right now. We could muscle through, but my experience with muscling through is that you end up not having any fun and not accomplishing very much, and everything's harder. Let's take a little break. Let's go watch a show, let's go for a walk, let's go on a field trip, let's go visit with some friends, and now come back to this with a lighter heart. And then you end up getting twice as much 3 times done.
Would you recommend maybe a time span? Let's do this 6 more weeks, 3 more weeks to see if it works out.
Yes.
Or would you just switch it so that you've done 3 Spanish curriculum?
Yes, I didn't do that. I didn't do the switching thing, and that's because when I'm a kid, I'm a quick start. It makes me a good entrepreneur because I can think on my feet, but it really hurt my confidence when I was growing up because I was a channel changer and I quit things. As soon as things got hard, I just shifted to the next thing, or if I got bored, and it really ended up damaging my confidence. So with my children, if they started violin lessons, I go, honey, that sounds great. You want to learn violin? Let's do it. And then they find out legitimately that they don't really like violin. I tried to always have solid endings. Like, oh, honey, okay, good. Let's let your teacher know. And why don't we have a little recital at the end of it? And I talked with the teacher, too. I said, can you make up a certificate, that shows that Madison's been studying violin for the last 3 months? Something to have that joy of completion, because I'm into the completion thing. And so I found that. So when you do something like that, too, I like having the thinking about the ending and planning the ending. So why don't we give it another month? A really good chance, and let's test it out. And then if it doesn't work, then with that solid ending, then we will decide what we're going to go on to the next thing. But I don't know, at least it wasn't good for me to just stop things. Yeah, so I like having that little solid ending where you've chosen, because that way you're in the power, right? And that's so confidence. You're making the powerful choice. Let's test it out, and then let's make the powerful choice that it looks like this curriculum isn't working. What else is there that might work better? Yeah.